Brisbane, and today we're going to be talking about how to choose your regulator. Ta-da! Now the good news is that pretty much everything, all the regulators that we have in the shop are going to do exactly what you want them to do. They're all going to give you air and will let you go swimming with the fishes. But with regulators, what you want to do is you want to invest as much as you possibly can to have the best performance. Now, what does a regulator actually do? Well, in your tank, you've got high pressure. But unfortunately, if we were going to try and breathe direct from that tank, we wouldn't fare so well out of it. What you need to do is you need to have something in between your tank and your second stage that transfers that really high pressure back down to a pressure that's not going to hurt your body. And that's the job of the first stage, the bit that goes onto your tank. Now, the job of the regulator is also to deliver air to other parts of your regulator set. So your low pressure inflator hose, so that gets clipped onto your BCD and inflates your BCD for you. You have your SPG, which will tell you how much air you've got left in your tank. And also your bright yellow one, your alternate second stage or your emergency second stage. What to look for? Basically, you want to look for the highest performance that you can afford, like I mentioned before. You also need to think about the type of diving you're doing. If you're a brand new open water student and you're not going to be diving a huge amount lower than 80 meters and you're quite happy in the shallows, then any of the regulators here is going to do the job for you. It's when you start going deeper that you start noticing the massive difference in a cheaper regulator and a top of the range regulator. And that's all down to the first stage, the bit here. When you pay a little bit more money, you're going to get what's known as a balanced diaphragm. And what that does is when you're at depth, it's going to deliver air to your regulator at exactly the same pressure as it did on the surface. You're not going to feel any different no matter where you are in the water. If you have a really cheap regulator set, then when you go down to about 35 meters, you're going to find it a little bit harder to breathe. It's the same for when you have less air in your tank. When you're going down to that last 50 bar, if you've got a cheaper regulator, you're going to start to feel it a little bit harder to breathe. If you have more of the top of the end regulators, you're going to find it nice and easy. You're not even going to notice. Now, the last things you need to think about with your regulator is whether you want DIN or yoke. So that's referring to the first stage, the attachment onto your tank. So yoke is kind of the norm, if you like, that most rental places have around the world. It doesn't hold to very high pressure. DIN, which is the one that screws into your tank, is better for higher pressures, so tech divers tend to go for that. If you were to get a DIN, it is possible and very easy to buy an adapter, so you can still use a yoke tank with your DIN regulator. But if you were to buy a yoke, it is near to impossible to have that transferred into a DIN tank. The other thing you need to think about is if you're going to be doing lots of travel. As most people nowadays, they prefer the warmer water to go diving. So a lot of companies now are making lighter regulators and smaller regulators so that when you're traveling, you don't have to worry so much about excess baggage charges. Last thing is your gauges. There are hundreds of different gauges out there. Do you want a console computer? Do you want just a normal SPG, a submersible pressure gauge that tells you your tank? Do you want your depth on there? Do you want a compass? There's so many options, and you just need to have a think about what you want, where you're going to be diving, what sort of instruments you really, really want on your gear at all times, and what stuff you're quite happy to have on your wrist. So that was how to choose a regulator. If you have any questions at all, come and see us at any one of our outlets at either Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne, or go online at scubadiving.com.au.